Welcome to Reimagining Education, a podcast by Michigan International Prep School. I'm Amy Dunlap, and we are excited to join Dr. Christie McDonald, the Executive Director of Traditional Undergraduate Admissions and Financial Aid at Northwood University, for our second in the series of podcasts here on the beautiful Northwood University campus. So today we're going to sort of continue talking about what Northwood has to offer in our partnership with them. So I know, I was thinking about this as I was preparing for this today, that when I was in high school in my senior year, there really wasn't much help with understanding what's next. I knew you had to apply for college, and I was basically told log on to Sally Mae, which doesn't exist anymore, and get yourself a loan. So today we're going to join Dr. McDonald and really talk about financial aid and what that means for students and how you can sort of learn more about it. So I'm going to jump right in here again. So I keep hearing folks saying financial aid, what is that? What do I need to know about it?
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to start by saying financial aid is scary, and we understand that at Northwood University. So I'm very fortunate to have a phenomenal financial aid team that offers one-on-one meetings with families and talks them through the process, because we do understand it is confusing, and we don't want families to go in and say, I'm going to not go to college because I don't understand financial aid. So when we talk about financial aid, it actually encompasses a few different things. We have federal aid that comes from the FAFSA, and the FAFSA stands for free education, free application for federal student aid. Sorry about that. And you can do that at studentaid.gov, but that is actually an application for federal aid, state aid, and institutional aid. So when parents want to say, where do I start with financial aid? That's always going to be your starting point, is to do that FAFSA. And the reason why we say that is because we never want to leave money on the table. And so get that FAFSA out there. And by that, you could qualify for federal aid, which is federal Pell Grant, supplemental education opportunity grants, and then federal loans, of course, if you need to borrow loans. But then on the state level, if you're a Michigan resident, for example, that FAFSA is actually an application for the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. And so that Michigan Achievement Scholarship is $5,500. And I always say families do it because it's a higher threshold than the federal Pell Grant is. But also, in addition to that, is TIP, which is Tuition Incentive Program. If you have students who had Medicaid at some point in their early teens, they could qualify for the Tuition Incentive Program. That is typically used at community colleges. However, Northwood University accepts that as well. And our students will actually deem an associate's degree when they come in with that TIP program. And so they can work towards getting those funds from the state of Michigan at a four-year institution. But in addition to that, there is institutional aid. And I always say to students, do that, because a lot of times institutional aid is based on need in addition to academics. So you might have your merit scholarships based on your grades, but you might have athletic scholarships that require you to fill out a FAFSA. You could also have any type of private donor scholarships that will sometimes take a look at need. And we actually have a big pool of private donor scholarships at Northwood, where generous donors have donated money for students to get their education at Northwood. And some of them is very specific as far as what their qualifier, what they want the student to have. So that's another thing. But really, the FAFSA is the starting point. Financial aid encompasses the whole umbrella. So from federal down to institutional. So that really is where you want to start, get that done, and then work with our financial aid team to kind of walk through the steps of the rest of it.
So that sounds really easy. So if you get on and you do your FAFSA, and then really the next step is just to contact the financial aid department and say help, and they'll help guide you to scholarships and things, or how are we finding those private scholarships?
So the private scholarships are something that I always tell students, this is something you need to start really early. Oftentimes we talk to families in March, April, and they're like, where's the private or the side scholarships? It's like, well, that really ended. And so we always tell families, put it on your calendar for holiday break. That's your homework over holiday break, is to apply for as many scholarships as you can. I tell students, block a day out of your break and just go after it and just to apply for all these scholarships. It's gotten a lot more streamlined, where a lot of times it's one application for several scholarships. So it doesn't take as long as it used to. But the point of thing for students is to do an essay. If they ask for an essay, this is your only shot as for pressing these applications. So people are selecting these applications. So I say, put really big thought into your essay, make it genuine to who you are, and sell yourself, because that's your only opportunity. They're not going to call and get to know you on the phone, anything like that. So I always say, go make sure you do a really good essay. But scholarships in general, I always tell families, check your credit union. You'd be surprised on how many credit union scholarships we get at Northwood. We're just being a member of that credit union, you can get a scholarship. Same thing for Parents Works. A lot of time where they work, they actually offer scholarships to their dependents, and a lot of families don't really understand that. Also, community foundations. huge, huge, huge. We would probably get the most outside scholarships from community foundations. And a lot of times students don't think that as a real value because it is a kind of a lengthy process in a lot of counties, but it is definitely worth it. And I would say we get the most from that outside scholarships at Northwood. In addition, there's a couple websites that we would direct students to. Actually, Sallie Mae has done a vetted scholarship search. And so they have a really good scholarship search tool on their websites. Sallie Mae is an alternative lender, but they also see it on the side of helping students get free financial aid in addition to being a lender for alternative private loans. Another one is called Going Merry, and is GOING Merry MERRY.com, and they have a great scholarship search as well. My last tip about outside scholarships is I always tell families create an email address that might say like McDonald Scholarships at gmail.com, and do all of your scholarship searches using that email, because oftentimes they tend to spam you a little bit, and you don't want that to happen to your email you use every day. So I would say set up a separate email address, go to check that email address to see if you get any scholarships, and that allows you to kind of keep your email address as private.
I love that. So many tips. See, all the things that I did not know 20 plus years ago. What about, though, you hear that stigma of, I think my parents make too much money. Why would I even fill out the FAFSA? What would you tell those students?
Fill out the FAFSA. And I say that genuinely because a lot of families, when they say that, because of where we stood as students years ago, the Pell Grant was really the only thing that families had to look forward as far as free financial aid. And that's just not the case anymore. So the Pell Grant threshold is actually very tight. And then that's what we know as adults. That ours says, I didn't qualify for Pell Grant. I make probably more than my parents did. I'm not going to complete it. And I always say, fill it out. The standards for Pell Grant have changed in the last 2 years, and the calculation is different. But in addition to that, the state of Michigan has a threshold that's a lot higher for the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. So you might not qualify for federal Pell Grant, but you could get $5,500 from the state of Michigan. So I always tell families, you're not locked in if you complete a FAFSA and you don't qualify. So you just won't take any steps to do the loans or anything like that. But at least we know for sure that there's not any money you're missing, and any free money in particular that you're missing.
Yeah, for sure. So what sort of tips and tricks would you give parents? I remember doing the FAFSA, and it was a long, drawn out process. Some of the questions were a little bit confusing. It can be difficult, especially if you're not used to living in that world every day. So what sort of tips and tricks would you give to families as they're working through the FAFSA, and if they need help, or, is there just if there's frustrations as you're going through it?
Well, great news. FAFSA has been very simplified over the last several years. It's not the long drawn out form that we remember when we were students, but it is a shortened form, still has some confusing questions on it, especially when you get to the investment asset part. I always say, if you're stuck at any point completing a FAFSA, call our financial aid office. They will hop on a Teams meeting with you. They will walk through it one question at a time, and they will help you. Another thing to take in mind is it is a very separate process nowadays. So the student's the owner of the FAFSA now, where before it was kind of like a joint ownership. Now the student owns the FAFSA. They complete all of their parts, and then they have to invite a parent to put their information in. So the student never sees the parent income anymore. In the prior years, you'd see the whole FAFSA. And so students will complete their part, and then it requires the family then to accept the invitation from the student and go in and consent to having their taxes pulled on. So all the tax information actually comes right from the IRS. You don't have to hand put that in there. The only piece that gets a little tricky, like I said, is if they have a business or they have investments. And that's why I have to say, really read the information box there if you want to do it on your own, because there's a lot of things that sounds like you might need to include in it, but you really do not. And so I say, pay attention to that. And if you have any questions, obviously call our financial aid office, because that's what we specialize in.
Awesome. So I do the FAFSA, I don't qualify for anything, and then I do some private scholarships, and I don't receive any of those. Like, what's next for me? What are my other options?
Sure. Well, hopefully at that point you have a merit scholarship from Northwood, and we can work with that. In addition, we do have loans available for students if they need to invest in their education. You'll know on the first round of recording we talked about our return on investment. So we do understand that Northwood University is a private school. I always say that you really have to get what you pay for, and so that investment's really important, especially when you have that return on investment. So even if you have to borrow little funds to come to Northwood, your earning potential is a lot higher when you graduate, and you're pretty much guaranteed a job when you graduate, because like I said, we have those employers wanting our students. So there are federal loans that students will all get based on filling out their FAFSA that they can apply for. Parents can apply for a Parent Plus loan, but in addition to that, there's alternative private loans that have gotten super competitive. A lot of credit unions offer them, and they go as low as 3 to 4% on an interest rate, and up to credit card rates. So you have to be really careful when you're shopping shopping around. But if you go to the Northwood website under loans, we actually have a comparison tool that lets you look at all the lenders we've used in the last year, and you can see their interest rates and all of that. So you can make a very informed decision if you have to go that route. But like I said, always call financial aid because we'd be happy to help you kind of weed through those and kind of understand what you're getting into before you actually do an application.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, anything to leave our listeners with as they're now processing all the financial aid, even as they've listened to the first in the series of just learning about Northwood, what would you leave them with today?
Reach out. Let us have a conversation. If you fill out your FAFSA and you're like, I don't qualify for a Pell Grant, reach out. Let's talk about all your options at Northwood University. And that's what we specialize in. We never want you to just kind of walk away and forget about it because you don't feel like it's possible, because Northwood University will make it possible. We'll figure out a way. Everybody that wants a Northwood education deserves a Northwood education. And that's what we pride ourselves on.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining me for our second in the series of podcasts. And for more information on Michigan International Prep School, head on over to miprepschool.org or to our social media channels on Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we'll see you next time on Reimagining the Podcast.
Reimagining Education is brought to you by Michigan International Prep School, a tuition-free K-12 online school. If you'd like to learn more about us and what we do, you can visit our website at miprepschool.org. That's miprepschool.org. Thanks so much for listening to this podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.